In 1956, they had their one and only child, April. Zethel, one of 15 siblings, and Art, one of 11, were almost content with one child. April likes to think of it was because that they had the perfect child, so why mess with perfection? And that also happened in my family when they had the perfect child. They other family members contend that they had their hands full with their precious and precocious little girl. Zethel, as most women at the time, was a homemaker for a while and then returned to work in the 1960s in a plastics assembly plant. It was there that she began advocating for better wages and working conditions. She was instrumental in organizing the plastics unions and became one of their first union representatives. April recalls the hushed accounts of suspicious activities, not unlike the violent confrontations of the time between the union labor advocates and those who opposed their formation. Zethel was never one to back down from a fight, especially when she was fighting for the underdog or for the betterment of hardworking folks. In around 1962, the Goodman family had moved to the burbs, as had many of the Huffman clan and their families. Zethel, Art, and April settled in St. Clair Shores. Those were times of large family gatherings, especially summer picnics, ball games, and huge holiday parties. No one ever debated that those southern Huffman girls could cook. They would never think of anyone leaving hungry. In fact, they usually said they made enough food to feed Cox's army. I don't know who that was, but they made enough food to feed Cox's army. There was always food left over. Or offering somebody a cup of coffee or sweet tea. Around 1966, Zethel and Art separated. With April and their beloved poodle Petey in tow, Zethel returned to North Carolina to help her mother Edna. Zethel painted, repaired things, cleaned, and did everything she could for her mama. What a wonderful example of unselfish love, especially for her aging mother, that Zethel set for her young daughter. Amid tears on both sides, Zethel was forced to leave. She simply ran out of money. She returned to Detroit, and Sister Pearl came to the rescue, helping Z get a job at Farmer Jack's in the meat department. Out of this time grew one of April's most poignant memories when Z was getting on her feet financially. April would not fully understand Zethel's sacrifice until only a few short years ago, when Zethel shared all the details almost 50 years after the fact. Zethel, always a strong, independent, and somewhat proud woman, had secured a loving, wonderful temporary home for April to stay with her sister Margaret, brother-in-law James Black, who the family called Blackie, and niece Alta. She made sure April was well cared for and even helped with additional household expenses. Even though April was happy living with her wonderful Aunt Margaret, who she calls her spiritual mom, there was a dull ache in her heart and a tinge of feeling of abandonment. Zethel later shared that she was sometimes sleeping in her car, not having enough money to provide for them both, with a place to live. What a wonderful example of a parent's love. Soon Zethel was able to rent a house right across the street from Margaret, just a few blocks from Pearl. She continued working at Farmer Jack's, and there met Felix Patton, Vice President for Borman's Inc., the company that owned Farmer Jack. How could he not fall for this beautiful, hard-working young woman? At about the same time, Zethel was invited to return to her union roots, but this time for the Meat Cutters Union, which later became affiliated with the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. Zethel was cut out for the job, no pun intended. I think there was. She stylishly dressed as she drove throughout the state of Michigan, again sticking up for the little guy. She was the only woman in what she called the good old boys club. She was upwardly mobile. Talk about breaking a glass ceiling. During this time, her relationship with Pat became more and more serious. It was an unlikely match. He was management, and she was union, but they made it work. They married in 1984 and had many happy years together, sharing their love for golf and the island paradise of Aruba, which they traveled to frequently. Her grandchildren, Christian and Ariel, were adopted from Romania in 1991. It was the second time she graced the front page of a newspaper. This time the Detroit Free Press, titled From Romania with Love. This was a happier title, although not as humorous as her front page news story from the Gastonia Gazette, which told the story of 18-year-old Zethel Huffman, who crashed in a plane, essentially in her own backyard. The true story led to her grandchildren calling her 9 Lives Nana. She survived falling and being trapped under ice, an axe injury from her brother, the roof of her house being blown off by a cyclone. She said she woke to the rain falling on her face, crashing in that airplane, being diagnosed with melanoma, breaking her neck in a triple rollover car accident, having CPR until the ambulance arrived at a care home, and finally the time that she was not breathing and April and I couldn't find her pulse. She awoke when the paramedics arrived. Shortly after, she stated that she had died, but wasn't afraid and heard a voice that told her she still had something more to do, so she must return. Admittedly, it may have been more than 9 lives. Now, Pat had accepted Christ as his Savior during Zethel's battle over melanoma. Zethel lost Pat, who was only 63 at the time, after he had a long battle with renal cancer. She went and stayed with him daily for months. April and I heard her release him from his struggle by telling him he had fought hard, but it was okay for him to rest now. Pat had previously asked me to promise that I would take care of his beloved Z. And April says I was good for my word. April remembered those precious words and released Z into the loving care of her Heavenly Father, just as she had seen Z do for Pat. And at that moment, realizing it was an amazing gift of love. Z, or Nana, was one of those amazing grandmas who loved her grandchildren immensely. So many times were spent with Christian and Ariel, and Zethel lavished them with love, gifts, and attention always. So much so that April wondered, is that the woman who raised me? She even gave each of them a brand new car.